So, good afternoon, everyone. Now I'm going to tackle about Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance. So, what is Mendelian inheritance? Mendelian inheritance describes the way in which genes and their corresponding traits are passed from parents to their offspring by means of dominant and recessive alleles. The modes of Mendelian inheritance are autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant, and Y-linked recessive. The fundamental laws of inheritance were first described by Gregor Mendel in 1865. According to Mendel, genes can be found in pairs and they are inherited in distinct units. Thus, offspring receives one gene from each parent. The alternative form a gene are called alleles. Depending on the appearance of genes, the offspring two types alleles can be identified as dominant alleles and recessive alleles. So this is the figure of Mendelian. Yan. There have three fundamental laws of inheritance. We have law of segregation, law of independent assortment, and law of dominance. When we say law of segregation, any inheritance rate comes in an allele pair. During the production of sex cells, each allele of the pair segregates into one sex cell. Once they are united during fertilization, the offspring has inherited an allele from each parent. When we say law of independent assortment naman, the different alleles of genes are sorted independently from each other in such a way that the inheritance of one allele is independent of the inheritance of another allele. When we say law of dominance naman is in the presence of two alleles, only the dominant from of the alleles is expressed. So what is non-Mendelian inheritance? The traits which do not follow the Mendelian inheritance follows the non-Mendelian inheritance. Typically, the genes with multiple alleles are inherited in non-Mendelian patterns. Multiple alleles do not show true dominance representativeness. The phenotype of the offspring highly depends on the environment. In human, almost all the traits are determined by the non-Mendelian inheritance. Examples are the non-Mendelian inheritance include multiple alleles, incomplete dominance, condominance, polygenic inheritance, pathogenic plasticity, and sex-linked traits. Example of non-Mendelian inheritance: multiple alleles, incomplete dominance, and condominance. When we say multiple alleles is for the dominant of a particular trait, multiple alleles comprise more than two alleles in the population. Human blood type is determined by three alleles A, B, and O. When we say incomplete dominance, in incomplete dominance, a heterozygous individual contains phenotype halfway between the dominant and recessive phenotypes. Different flower colors in snapdragons arise by the incomplete dominance. When we say condominance, in the condominance, both dominant and recessive alleles independently show up in the offspring. As a result of condominance, roan cattle show both red and white hair on their skin. Condominance during inheritance flower color in Mirabilis jalapa is shown in figure number 2. So this is the image or figure of condominance. Yan. We have polygenic inheritance, phenotypic plasticity, sex-linked inheritance. When we say polygenic inheritance, is polygenic traits more than one gene is involved in the determination of a particular trait. These genes can be found in a different loci of different chromosomes, weight, height, skin color, and most of the other human traits are polygenic. Phenotypic plasticity naman is in the phenotypic plasticity, the phenotype affects the environment. Skin color, personality traits, weight, and height are phenotypic traits. When we say sex-linked inheritance, the inheritance of genes of the X chromosomes different males and females. In order to show the recessive phenotype in males, only a single recessive allele is required. Therefore, males get the recessive condition in diseases such as hemophilia and red-green color blindness. Similarities between Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance. Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance describe the patterns of inheritance of a particular trait during sexual reproduction. Both Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance can be used to describe the genetic basis of the phenotypes in the heterozygous individuals for a particular trait. So this is the Mendelian inheritance versus non-Mendelian inheritance. Mendelian inheritance is the way in which genes and their corresponding traits are passed from parents to their offspring by means of dominant and recessive alleles. Non-Mendelian inheritance is the patterns of inheritance which do not follow the Mendelian inheritance, involve only two alleles, involve multiple alleles of polygenes. The two alleles of a gene are either dominant or recessive. The two alleles of neither dominant nor recessive. Phenotypic proportion can be predetermined theoretically. Phenotypic proportion differ from theoretic proportion. Phenotypic traits in Mendel's pea plants is an example. Examples include many human traits. Yan. So, Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance are the two methods that describe the genetic basics of phenotypes in heterozygous individuals for a particular trait. Mendelian inheritance describes the inheritance of phenotypes determined by only two alleles. One of the two alleles is dominant and the other recessive for the phenotype. Non-Mendelian inheritance describes how multiple alleles and polygenes are involved in the domination of phenotypes. Therefore, the main difference between Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance is the influence of the number of alleles or number of genes that are involved in the determination of a particular trait. So that is my report of Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance. Thank you.